enchaînons avec le prochain panel. Nous allons parler infrastructure, logistique et sécurité. Comment façonner le paysage énergétique de l'Afrique. Et pour ce faire, j'appelle au présidium Jo van der Walt de Focus Group, Shakwa Nyambe, directeur général SNC Incorporated Lawyers and Business, et Serigne Mboup de Senegal, Serigne Mboup. Philippe Summers, président directeur général de AC, je ne sais pas comment on prononce, 54 oh, ok, S54. Merci. Et pour modérer ce panel, j'appelle Oliver Onyekweli, partenaire à McKinsey and Company.
Non, Manuel Lengo, s'il te plaît. C'est le modérateur.
Oui, exactement. Donc, je rectifie. On a une modératrice. C'est un modérateur? OK. C'est écrit modératrice. D'accord. C'est un modérateur. Manuel Luengo. Ça ne respecte pas les normes du genre, votre panel. OK, d'accord, on va noter ça pour les prochains panels. Je vois des gens qui acquiescent dans la salle. D'accord. Alors, Monsieur Luengo, je vous passe la parole pour une trentaine de minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I'm, well, by the way, I'm from the World Bank, that is Skip also. I'm representing here the country director of the World Bank. We are really excited to support the government and different partners in this exciting event, and in particular this panel. I have the pleasure to have very exciting speakers for this particular panel, ranging from logistics, security, the legal framework on infrastructure, logistics, and security. As you know, this is a very exciting topic. I will say, especially in the new landscape, where Africa is going to definitely to develop more and more their resources, and the issue of security, logistics, especially after the COVID-19 crisis, and we would argue also with the existing conflict in Europe, definitely it is more and more important. So just I would like to pass the word for maybe just some seconds to present each one of you. It has been already introduced, your name and title, so maybe we can start from right to the left. So Oliver, can you just with some seconds introduce yourself, and we can start with the panel. Thanks.
Is this working? Okay. I hope folks can hear me. It's Oliver Onyekweli. I'm an associate partner and lead of the West African oil and gas practice at McKinsey. Okay.
I'm Philippe Summers. I'm the CEO of Phase54. We do project logistics advisory for energy and infrastructure projects in Africa.
La plupart des personnes, donc je suis.
Quand ça marche, quand on
okay.
il faut juste on a eu des soucis avec. Il ne faut pas appuyer sur celui-là, c'est le bouton en bas. Voilà, là c'est ouvert.
Ok, because this one is open. Ok, donc je suis Serigne Mboup, ancien directeur général de Petrosen, Société des pétroles du Sénégal, et aussi de la SAR, la Société africaine de raffinage. Donc je suis aujourd'hui dans le contenu local pour participer avec un certain nombre de partenaires dans la plateforme logistique et le soutien aux opérations pétrolières à travers la société CL Sénégal. Merci.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shakwa Nyambe. I'm an energy and natural resources lawyer. I manage a law firm called SNC Incorporated with offices in Windhoek, Namibia, advising a lot of energy, natural resources companies from project inceptions to operations of projects, as well as to agreements, corporate, commercial mergers and acquisitions, and disposal of assets. So that's my focus. Thank you.
My name is Joe van der Walt. I am the CEO of Focus Group. We're an intelligence-driven risk management company. We've been working on the continent of Africa for the last 23 years plus, and we have been fortunate enough to operate in 43 of the 54 countries in Africa. Also want to thank the Senegal people for hosting us. It's my first time in Dakar, and I've been welcomed with open arms, so thank you for that. It's really great, amazing, thanks.
Let's get started. The focus is during these 30 minutes to have an interaction between all of you. So I'm going to ask certain questions, but feel free to react with your own comments. So as I mentioned in the introduction, the focus of the panel is to unpack a little bit where are the recent regional developments in infrastructure and the role of logistics, I would say especially given the context after the COVID-19 crisis, and what are like the proactive measures that the different governments can do to respond to these different challenges and take the more and more the opportunities in the sector. No? I would like to start with Oliver. Asking him to set up a little bit the context with the reflection on the lessons learned in the Nigerian example, on how you have seen what are like the good practices, how the landscape on logistics and security can be developed in I would say in a conducive way to develop business in the infrastructure sector. The floor is yours, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Manuel. I think just to frame it, I think over the last kind of 2 days, it's been very encouraging to hear all the companies that are investing in the upstream and the midstream here in MSGBC. A lot of the work I do is in Nigeria, and I've tried to sort of think through some learnings that we've had in this basin, in our basin, that we might even be able to apply here in MSGBC. And I think if you take a little bit step back, some of the work we've done, we recently did a bit of benchmarking around the world. And what we found out was that African upstream operations on a unit operating cost basis are anywhere between 10 and 15% more costly than comparable basins around the world, and about 70% more carbon intensive, right? And I think that's important for us to keep in mind, because as we continue to globalize, right, our operating companies, the IOCs, the super majors, they will vote with their feet, right? They're going to go to the basins that are the most cost competitive, the least carbon intensive. And so here in Africa, in MSGBC, as we start on the journey, we need to be mindful, we need to be creative about how do we bring that cost premium down. That's very important. And as we try to decompose the cost premium that we've seen, a lot of that is due to logistics, right? Logistics challenges, security challenges across the continent, as well as supply chain inefficiencies. And I thought I would just share with this group a little bit of the innovations that we are trying to do in Nigeria to deal with that, and I think some of them might even be applicable here, right? And I think maybe just starting with security, I think many folks will know where I'm coming from. We are extremely challenged with our security landscape. And in fact, I think recently I saw a number, it's around 200,000 or 300,000 barrels per day of crude is lost in our country. So you can imagine, I think Mr. Sullivan talked about Sangomar, right? That's almost 2 to 3 Sangomars every day of lost volumes. So security is a critical issue. I think what we've tried to do in Nigeria is find ways for the operators to collaborate, to work together, to share the burden, to share the costs. We've now instituted programs where operators share security convoys out to deep water assets. So instead of one IOC using a security vessel, another IOC using a similar security vessel, we harmonize the routes so that people can share those assets so that you can reduce the cost. We've now got zonal security being done shared between operators so that you can get the benefits of cost. And even on newer programs like drone surveillance, interpretation is being done together. How do we pool our data and our insights to draw meaningful conclusions to make our operating environments a little bit safer? So I think as we look here in MSGBC, there may be opportunities for operators to collaborate together to do things in an integrated way. And by the way, the same thing is happening on logistics, right? In Nigeria, we're now sharing helicopter contracts. So folks are sharing seats, they're sharing helicopter slots, we're sharing petroleum supply vessels, doing common routes instead of serving asset by asset, trying to be a bit innovative, even on the supply-based landscape, looking for ways to consolidate operations, consolidate laydown space, share warehousing space, so that we can keep costs down. These are the things that we think are going to keep investors in our country, that I think it's actually relevant for this basin as well as you start the journey to think about that. And then maybe just lastly on the infrastructure, I think we've recognized as well in our nation that, given the security challenges that we face, development of midstream infrastructure like pipelines is difficult. And as we know, gas today is both domestically critically important in our nation, but also from the export opportunity, we want to be able to maximize that. And so we're looking at ways that operators can pool their capital and their resources to develop gas hubs, okay? Shallow water offshore gas hubs, deep water gas hubs, where funds can be pooled, infrastructure can be built, floating LNG are things that we're looking at, even floating LNG and domestic regasification, where we can't bring the gas from inland Nigeria to the coast, perhaps we can bring it offshore gas to the coast by regas. So these are some of the things that we're doing collaboratively now, innovatively, right, to address some of the challenges that we're seeing. And I'll stop there. Maybe there's some other reactions. Yeah.
Wonderful. No, that's great to set up the scene. Maybe let me pass the floor quickly to Philippe from your perspective as a logistic company. And seeing that now the trend is the need of scaling up precisely on that front. How do you see the landscape, and if you can focus a little bit on the opportunities and challenges in the sector? Thanks.
Thank you. I think, first of all, I think it's very important to say that unfortunately, logistics and supply chain was always at the back burner. It was very much always engineering was taking the lead, technology, and then eventually, when the big piece of the module of thousands or hundreds of tons was fabricated, then the companies often realized that there was not a really adequate road or port or lifting capacities. So I think we see already an improvement in Africa as well, that we are now not always in the very beginning, but at least we're not at the end of the chain anymore. And unfortunately, it has taken hard lessons, because now, of course, with the supply chain, I would say in shambles, or the cost where it's completely through the roof. And I give you a few practical examples that are easy to understand, is that when you have a container from China to Europe, it was 2,500. That same container now is 12,500. Okay, so if you have a 5% margin, you can do the math. And so now the shipping lines are printing their own money. And not only is there a very high cost related to it, but there is also capacity issues. And I think capacity is almost as important as the price, because of course for smaller value consumables, it is a big hurdle, the logistics cost. Of course, when you have very high infrastructure or energy projects, that percentage is obviously lower. Nevertheless, it's a very important part of the offer today, and it has been all about competitiveness. So Western companies, whether American, European, Japanese, or have to compete against Chinese, Koreans. And so it is definitely a factor that we really need to bring down the cost of logistics. It is not normal that the cost in Africa is sometimes 3 times the price for 1/10 of the distance. So we need definitely better infrastructure, but we also need some investor-friendly processes, whether, to get some unnecessary weight surcharges on the road, to emergency customs processes that needs to be simplified. And so we need to attract these, we need to solve these problems as a logistics partner so that we can bring down the cost. Bringing down the cost will be savings for the African projects. And also, when it comes to consumables, it will also have more access to Africans to buy products and improve their buying power.
Wonderful. That's quite clear. Let's focus a little bit on one element on the cost of logistics that it is central in the African context, and I would like to learn a little bit the dynamics is that on the security side. And for that, I would like to hear from Joe. In your particular opinion, what role does the security sector play in this scale up of the investments, especially in the oil, gas, and power sector?
Security starts actually at home, meaning that the government in where the operation takes place needs to look at its security cluster. And the reason for that is that foreign direct investment should not actually invest so heavily into the security solutions. That should be the responsibility of government itself. The problem is that in a lot of African countries that where there is investment in oil and gas or mining or whatever the case may be, because the police, the military, intelligence services and so forth, they are not able to actually cope with the problem. FDI are forced to actually increase budgets where it should be 2% or whatever the case may be. It is now increased to 20 or 30 or 40%, maybe not that high, but I mean there's a creeping increase in order to deal with the security situation. That has a direct economical impact, because if those funds were not diverted to the security problem, it could have been diverted to the operation itself. It could have been diverted to corporate social responsibility. It could be put into your local communities. One of the biggest problems from a security perspective is the unemployment rate. So if government increases capacity within the security cluster, FDI will not be forced to actually spend extra money, which could have gone to the place it's supposed to do. The same applies to the logistical side of things that we have supported. Now you need to bring foreigners to come in because there is a general perception that you cannot trust the local people in the country itself because they are involved and they are part of the problem. So it's this reoccurring thing that is taking place. So for me, it starts at home. Government needs to shape up in the security cluster.
A follow-up question, Joe. So a follow-up question on that front. How do you see the trend? Is something that is improving over the last years, or I mean, what are like the trends that you are seeing on that particular front? No?
If I can, sorry. I think I have not seen improvement. I have, in fact, seen this going backwards. The problem is that it is a mindset thing. People like to look at challenges. And that for me is the problem. We need to start looking at what is the opportunities. If we address the opportunities, we will solve these so-called challenges. It needs to be the concept or the lookout or whatever you want to call it needs to be such that when there is localization, local beneficiation, and this is nothing new. We've said this over and over. The problem is that nobody is doing it. From a security perspective, it should come in there. You should partner with the local communities. There should be training that is taking place. We should transfer knowledge. Effectively, any foreign security company that comes into an operation itself, the aim should be to work himself out of a job within a year or 2 or 3. Because there needs to be an enforcement to say you have to transfer the knowledge. You have to benefit the local communities. That should be the key. And then from there, the foreign involvement needs to become less and less and less. And there is programs to do this. We have installed community watch initiatives, for example, where you are using, the elders in the villages, so that because people say, well, where can we fit them in? We can't use them. You can. It's a question of will, but it takes work, and people are lazy. So, unfortunately, that's the truth.
Yeah. Philippe, you want to intervene? You have to press again.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, that's good.
So, no, I think I follow Joe where challenge may become an opportunity. And I think, in particular, logistics is an opportunity for us, Africa, to participate and handle the projects in logistics from or by Africans for African projects. And because the competitiveness is one, but it's also our activity, and I'm not going to put down our industry, but it's not rocket science, okay? And so when we train the people, we can definitely bring much more local content and much more expertise, and it's also a form of technology, right? And so this is, there is enough large logistics companies that are ready to support it, to exchange. We, as a company, as a former corporate leader, we had talent programs, and we exchanged people in Africa to come to Europe or to the US or to the Far East, and to learn, be trained, because it is about training. And sometimes the local content is maybe a little bit too hardly imposed. I think it's also should be a transition. And we hear about supply chain failures. Yes, absolutely. And this is sometimes because we are too much in a hurry. Okay. So I think training. And so we are looking at, cooperating with universities or high schools so that we can unlock
the potential. No, definitely. I think that opens me to especially this sort of environment, no, that I think you are alluding to. So maybe I'm going to ask Shakwa to give your perspective from the legal perspective on how countries can develop a conducive, let us say, policy and legal framework to promote these elements that we are talking about, good practices, no, on attracting and developing and scaling up the logistic business.
Thank you, Manuel. I think what is important to note is that every sector requires legal frameworks. That's the only way to propel that sector. And those legal frameworks should be effective. They should be operational. And when it comes to the logistics sector, the legal framework I can think of which for Africa can really play a very vital role is the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFTA, which is meant to promote intertrade among African nations. And this was signed in January of 2021. At the moment, as we speak, the intra-trade in Africa is at 15%. And if you compare to other continents or other blocks, in Europe, we're speaking of 67%. In Asia, we're speaking of 58%. North Africa is 37%. And there's a huge opportunity for Africa with the AFTA. You know, we're talking about 3.5, close to 1.5 billion people, you know, in over 55 countries, with a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion. So this is a big opportunity, and that's the opportunity which is there for the logistics sector, because for you to be able to ensure that this is workable, we need to remove the trade barriers and the tariffs among our states. If I have to transport goods and services across border from Senegal to the Gambia or to Guinea-Bissau or to Mali, you know, it can only work if there's no tariffs and barriers. At the moment, we still have that. And we have removed the tariffs with other blocs, like with the European Union. We haven't removed these tariffs among ourselves, and that is what inhibiting us from growing our sectors. And remember, all these infrastructure projects gets connected to many other services like the logistics and the energy sector as a whole. So we need to work more on ensuring that we make after work. No trade has taken place since AFTA was enforced, and it's time, I think, for the energy sector to get involved. You know, AFTA should be engaging with us, and we need the institutions of Dr. Farouk, like the Association of Petroleum Producers for Africa, also to engage AFTA, because you have the good plans for Apple, and how do you ensure that this works out if you have the trade barriers and the tariffs? So we need to engage, and all these institutions we have, like the Africa Energy Chamber, we need to start talking. Otherwise, we're going to have this good infrastructure, good plans, but if your trade has barriers in terms of tariffs, then you can't go anywhere. So that's what we need to alleviate, and that's where the opportunities for the logistics sector is also. Thank you.
Thanks, Alok. Donc, peut-être je vais passer à Monsieur Mboup. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner un peu votre perspective du Sénégal dans le contexte de logistique? Bon, certainement, votre expérience à partir des pétroliers, ça va permettre de nous donner un tour d'horizon. Et je dirais, pour connecter la réponse de notre collègue, c'est de voir quel rôle peut jouer aussi l'aspect régional. D'accord. Donc, la parole est à vous.
Je pense que... It works, OK. Je pense que, bon, le Sénégal a une bonne place. Quelqu'un a parlé d'opportunité tout à l'heure. Une opportunité pour l'Afrique, mais aussi pour les compagnies nationales. Puisque je crois que tout est question de coûts et tout est question aussi d'exploitation sécurisée des ressources, puisque les Africains ont en général, vous le savez, dans beaucoup de pays, la perception que l'on a de l'exploitation des ressources pose beaucoup de problèmes. Et aujourd'hui, les ressources étant en Afrique, je crois qu'on peut comprendre que l'expertise vient de l'étranger, on peut comprendre que les équipements viennent de l'étranger, mais évidemment, on ne peut pas comprendre que les coûts de mobilisation, des mobilisations localement, de support logistique, fassent monter les coûts d'exploitation ou de production à des niveaux qui dépassent même les coûts de ces équipements, comme cela a pu être dit tout à l'heure. Je pense qu'il faut que les gouvernements créent l'environnement. On a parlé tout à l'heure d'environnement légal et institutionnel. Le Sénégal l'a déjà fait. Maintenant, ce qui reste, c'est une volonté, à mon avis, de trois parties. L'État d'abord, parce que ces communautés doivent avoir, par rapport à ces exploitations qui vont se dessiner, un sentiment d'appartenance et d'appropriation. Parce que c'est ça qui amène la pacification des relations avec les communautés. Les sociétés de services, le secteur privé local, par la création d'emplois, la création de richesses, la création de valeur ajoutée, mais aussi le transfert de compétences, et pour les sociétés pétrolières internationales et les sociétés de services, qui sont souvent leurs partenaires, pouvoir travailler dans un environnement sécurisé avec des coûts supportables mais bénéfiques pour tout le monde. Donc c'est un peu cette trilogie-là, je pense qu'il va falloir essayer de sauvegarder. Au Sénégal, ce qu'on a fait, c'est effectivement les lois dont on a parlé tout à l'heure, la loi sur le contenu local et un certain nombre d'autres règlements, puisque si cela est fait, ce qui reste aujourd'hui, c'est comment on peut bâtir un partenariat dynamique entre les sociétés de services sénégalaises qui sont appelées à aller dans cette activité, les compagnies de services internationales et les IOCs. Si on arrive à trouver comment partager, bâtir des synergies, minimiser les coûts, parce qu'on l'oublie souvent, mais tous ces coûts sont des coûts en fait supportés par les pays qui possèdent les ressources. Quand vous avez des coûts recouvrables dans les contrats, quand des compagnies de services interviennent ici, ce qui est facturé est retiré des parts de l'État avant partage des revenus. Et donc c'est tout ça qui fait que, pour que ça soit viable, durable et dans un environnement sécuritaire, il faut qu'on bâtisse cette trilogie de synergie. Et donc, je pense que ça va nous permettre d'avancer. J'ai beaucoup apprécié l'expérience du Nigeria, qui est un pays qui a une tradition bien plus ancienne que la nôtre. Le Sénégal a essayé de faire des benchmarks dans tous ces pays, Nigeria, Ghana, Angola, Gabon, mais aussi en Asie, aux États-Unis et ailleurs, pour voir comment les choses avancent là-bas. Et c'est de là qu'est sortie la synthèse de l'environnement légal et institutionnel qui est installé au Sénégal. Donc je pense que nous devons faire ça. Sur la sécurité simplement, et pour dire que le Sénégal a fait des efforts. Bon, c'est vrai que la sécurité n'est pas un thème sur lequel on peut souvent discuter, mais notre marine nationale est une marine assez équipée, en tout cas spécialement équipée pour la protection des sites de production, leur sécurisation, les bases d'opération, qu'elles soient offshore, mais aussi onshore avec la gendarmerie. L'armée nationale aussi, tout le monde l'a vu, s'est dotée d'équipements avec le partenariat, d'ailleurs, je pense, des compagnies qui sont celles qui opèrent les blocs, pour donc créer un environnement sécuritaire qui permette d'aller plus. Ce qu'il faut, par contre, c'est les auxiliaires de sécurité au niveau des différents sites, où là, des bases logistiques, où les équipements qui sont, on le sait, très importants doivent être stockés, et puis faire en sorte qu'il y ait une meilleure communication. Et le dernier point, c'est, mon collègue l'a relevé tout à l'heure, je crois qu'on a réglé au Sénégal et en Afrique, dans beaucoup de coins, en tout cas beaucoup de parties de l'Afrique, la problématique des échanges de marchandises. Au Sénégal particulièrement, nous avons l'UEMOA, qui est l'Union monétaire est-africaine, où on a un tarif douanier unique. On ne demande plus, d'abord, point de vue identité, on n'a même pas besoin de passeport pour voyager. Et c'est le cas de la CEDEAO. La CEDEAO, c'est 15 pays jusqu'au Nigeria. Moi, pour aller à Lagos, prendre l'avion, je peux aller avec ma carte d'identité sénégalaise. Et donc, on a réglé ça. Il y a un tarif extérieur commun. Donc, il y a des barrières douanières qui sont définies. Donc, il n'est pas très difficile si on va dans une dynamique de synergie, et surtout pour le MSGBC où tout est à bâtir. La difficulté, elle est là. Et c'est un beau laboratoire pour moi, d'expérimentation, en tout cas d'une nouvelle vision, qui permette que la Gambie, le Sénégal, la Guinée-Bissau, la Mauritanie, nous battions avec, aujourd'hui, c'est BP, Cosmos, Woodside, c'est Halliburton, c'est Schlumberger, c'est Modex, c'est quelques sociétés comme ça, celles qui sont là et beaucoup d'autres que j'ai oubliées, qu'elles me pardonnent, qu'avec les sociétés d'ici, qu'avec le comité du contenu local, comment nous pouvons faire justement pour encadrer cette logistique et partager les coûts, puisqu'on n'a pas besoin de 20 compagnies d'hélicoptères, on n'a pas besoin de 20 bases. Le président l'a dit hier, il faut des synergies fortes pour donc réduire un peu plus les coûts. Je suis désolé si j'ai...
Non, c'était excellent. Et Monsieur Mboup. Donc, so we are going to maybe come to a closing. So I'm going to ask a final question for each one of the members of the panel. Just keep it very, very succinct, no more than 1 minute, please. We are over time. So the question is, forward-looking, what is to be expected in the realm of the logistic business, in particular in the oil, gas, and power industry in Africa? And if you can share a certain key suggestion for governments and policymakers. So maybe I'll start here. Okay, go ahead, Oliver.
Okay, yeah, I think the outlook is going to be one of cost orientation, right? And I think all the things that my colleagues said around localization and local content, going to start at home and security, what I talked about in terms of operators working together, these are things that we're going to have to approach with incredible urgency, like we're in a $30 per barrel environment, right? We have to take that mindset and be ruthless with cost. And I think that's what I take from this, right? We can't rest at all now that we're at $100 oil. We have to be ruthless with cost. We have to explore every avenue and be innovative in how we address the premium. And I think some of the things we talked about here, I just hope the urgency, we maintain that going forward.
That's
So, yeah, I can really rely on what you say. I think matter of urgency is definitely an issue, but I'm definitely see this as a good time for the continent. There's huge opportunities, not only in the energy sector, but also in other verticals or industries. And yeah, the glass is definitely more than half full than empty, but there is a sense of urgency, and I think that's a really important issue. Yeah.
Il faut, pour que nous puissions tirer le maximum, je parlais tout à l'heure de partenariat stratégique entre les différentes composantes, mais si nous arrivons à créer un environnement qui permette aux compagnies pétrolières, elles en ont besoin, aux compagnies de services internationales, elles en ont besoin, d'être sûres de trouver en Afrique les services aux mêmes standards et aux mêmes exigences qu'elles peuvent trouver à Houston, Aberdeen ou ailleurs, avec des coûts naturellement maîtrisés, je pense que nous aurons fait une avancée essentielle. Et la même chose sur la sécurité. Pour ça, on a parlé de formation. Moi, je parle aussi de mise à niveau des acteurs locaux, parce que l'Afrique a quand même les ressources, qu'elles soient humaines, qu'elles soient donc matérielles souvent, puisque les écoles fonctionnent très bien, malgré tout, que nous soyons capables de financer ces mises à niveau pour permettre aux sociétés donc d'avoir des ressources humaines capables de répondre à ces exigences. Je pense que si on fait cela, on aura non seulement créé un environnement économiquement viable, on aidera les gouvernements à mieux contenir les problématiques et l'avenir sera encore plus radieux pour les compagnies pétrolières internationales et leurs partenaires de services qui doivent avoir désormais, je pense, une vision régionale de leur présence en Afrique sur un temps plus ou moins long et non sur une stratégie très court-termiste.
Merci beaucoup. Shakwa, quelqu'un...
I think in conclusion, I'll say the logistics services sector needs to innovate. They need to move away from the traditional logistics, of the warehousing, the depot, and the offices. Need to bring more technical, innovations to the table, which are able to respond to some of the serious risks within the industry, like cyber attacks. No, we need that to be in place, because a cyber attack can cripple your upstream, your midstream, your downstream, and your business is down. So we need to bring in innovations which can respond and be proactive to all those issues, and also to alleviate these tariffs among the cross-border trades. If you have a one-stop border crossing over to the Gambia or from South Africa all the way Namibia to Zimbabwe, you can't be paying tariffs, and you are not helping to promote intertrade. So we need to alleviate all these tariffs which are in place, and the logistics sector can be propelled to a higher standard. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shakwa. Joe, your final
Yeah, thank you. In 2050, I think there will be about 2 billion people in Africa, on the African continent. I think the projection is 2 out of 5 world children will be born in Africa. So if we just look at the population boom that's going to take place, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how are we going to sustain these numbers? How are we going to keep unemployment down? How are we going to do food security? And these are the pressing questions that we need to answer. And the only way for me that we can achieve this is to have real political will. Governments need to also say, listen, we are prepared to play our part, just as the private sector is there. And maybe the solution is PPP, private-public partnerships. But I'm hoping that we will be cognizant of those numbers, because if we go the way we are going now, our energy resources, some of it will become redundant, and there will be no economical growth, which will set us back. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Joe. So I think we come to a conclusion of this panel, so join me with a round of applause for these panelists. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.